There exists an invisible account that each soul carries through its existences, a cosmic debt woven by every thought, every word, every action we cast into eternity, like seeds that inevitably return, transformed into a harvest of experiences. Paramahansa Yogananda revealed to his most devoted disciples that karma is not a system of divine punishment, but a sacred school where consciousness learns through the immutable law of cause and effect until it attains the spiritual maturity necessary to completely transcend the chains of terrestrial causality and fly free like a bird that has finally broken through the golden cage of karmic necessity. But what if your soul had already paid off all these ancestral debts? What if the sufferings you have traversed, the lessons you have learned, the transformations you have embraced, were already sufficient to liberate you from the invisible bonds that tie most human beings to the repetitive cycles of birth, experience, death, and rebirth? In this sacred moment of revelation, you will discover 7 unmistakable signs that demonstrate when a soul has completed its journey of karmic payment and now walks free upon the earth as a realized being, carrying within itself the peace of the righteous and the light of the liberated. There is a decisive moment in spiritual life when the invisible chains of karma, which bound you for entire existences, begin to dissolve like mist before the sun. Many seek this instant without even perceiving when it happens. But what if you had already paid off your karmic debts and didn't know it? What if the signs of your liberation were already present, discreet yet unmistakable, waiting only for your spiritual eyes to open? Paramahansa Yogananda taught that karma is not punishment, but a silent master. It shapes circumstances, attracts people, repeats situations until the lesson is engraved upon the soul. However, there exists a point when the karmic wheel ceases to turn over you. It is the instant when the awakened spirit owes nothing more to the past, when ancient chains have been purified by consciousness. But how to recognize this? How to know if you are living the harvest of a new life, free from hidden debts? The masters affirm that liberation does not arrive with trumpets or celestial announcements. It manifests in subtle yet powerful signs that mark the passage from an imprisoned existence to a life of true inner freedom. And it is precisely about these signs that we will speak today. Prepare yourself, because the next few minutes may reveal something that will completely change how you view your own history. Upon discovering the 7 signs that you have already paid off all your karma, you will understand that many of the pains you judged as punishments were, in truth, final tests before spiritual victory. What few perceive is that this state is not reserved only for saints or the illuminated. It is within reach of any soul that has traveled with courage the path of discipline and surrender. Perhaps you are already living this milestone without knowing. Perhaps the symptoms of your liberation are before you at this exact moment. Remain with me, because in the next instance, I will reveal the 7 secret signs that Yogananda described as unmistakable marks of the soul that has become. The first and most sublime sign that you have paid off your karmic debts manifests as a profound serenity that no external storm can shake. Not the superficial oids conflicts, but the oceanic tranquility of one who has discovered within himself the immobile center around which all life's turbulence without ever managing to penetrate the essence. When karma is paid, automatic emotional reactivity dissolves naturally, replaced by a conscious response that emanates from the illuminated heart, not from the open wounds of the past. Imagine a crystalline lake in the sacred mountains of the Himalayas. Even when furious winds agitate its surface, the depth remains serene and translucent, reflecting with perfect clarity the infinite sky that mirrors itself in its water. Thus is the soul that has paid its debts. The world's provocations may create temporary ripples on the personality's surface, but the essential being remains imperturbable, anchored in the unshakable certainty that everything that happens serves the greater purpose of spiritual evolution, and nothing can truly damage that which is eternal. Yogananda used to tell of a disciple who, after years of intense spiritual practice, was publicly insulted by an old enemy, but instead of reacting with anger or hurt, felt only genuine compassion for the suffering that motivated that aggression. "Master," he said later, "I felt as if someone had thrown stones at a mountain. The stones ricocheted, but the mountain didn't even notice." The Guru smiled and replied, "When you become the mountain, my son, karma has nowhere left to grasp." The practice for recognizing this sign in your own life is simple but profound. Observe your reactions during the next few days when facing situations that previously caused irritation, anxiety, or fear. If you perceive that you respond with natural calm, without mental effort to control negative emotions, but simply because agitation no longer arises spontaneously, know that your soul has already transcended significant layers of karmic debt and walks toward complete liberation. The second sign of karmic payment reveals itself through the mysterious dissolution of repetitive patterns that once seemed to pursue your life like persistent shadows, those apparently interminable cycles of relationships that ended in the same painful way. Professional opportunities that evaporated following identical scripts, financial difficulties that returned like predictable tides, or family conflicts that repeated generation after generation like echoes of ancestral wounds never truly healed. When karma is completed, these patterns simply cease to exist, not because you fight against them, but because the energy that fed them has been transmuted in the light of conscious understanding. Think of the deep grooves that a cart creates by passing repeatedly over the same dirt path. Initially, the wheels naturally follow these depressions because it is the path of least resistance, creating increasingly deeper grooves that eventually become obligatory trails. But when the road is paved with the golden asphalt of spiritual wisdom, those old grooves disappear completely, allowing the vehicle of consciousness to freely choose any direction without being limited by the patterns of the past. Esoteric tradition preserves the story of a woman who for 20 years attracted partners who abandoned her exactly after 2 years of relationship, always following the same devastating pattern of initial promises followed by gradual disinterest and abrupt departure. After a profound inner transformation, where she finally forgave the father who had abandoned her in childhood, understanding that she attracted these experiences to heal the original wound, the pattern broke instantly. Her next relationship flourished in a stable and loving union that endured until the end of her days, as if the universe finally recognized that the lesson had been learned. Examine your own life with a retrospective gaze and identify those patterns that used to repeat like the implacable mechanics of destiny. If you perceive that situations that were once magnetic to you simply no longer appear in your reality, or when they appear, you traverse them with ease without reproducing the old dramas, celebrate silently. Your soul is paying its debts and conquering new territories of freedom. The third sign manifests as an extraordinary alchemical transformation where each painful experience of the past, each betrayal that sealed your heart, each loss that tore pieces from your soul, each injustice that burned your hopes, spontaneously transmutes into profound gratitude, not for the pain itself, but for the wisdom that sprouted from that arid soil and for the inner strength that was forged in the furnace of conscious suffering. When karma is paid off, you not only forgive those who caused wounds, you secretly bless them for having been unconscious instruments of your spiritual evolution. This transformation is not the result of mental effort or imposition of positive thinking, but natural flowering of the mature soul that finally understands the sacred purpose hidden in each apparent injustice. Just as the wise gardener gives thanks not only for the sunlight that feeds his plants, but also for the rain, wind, and even frost that strengthen their roots. Awakened consciousness recognizes that both moments of joy and periods of tribulation served equally the greater purpose of its spiritual In the secret archives of Tibetan masters is recorded the story of a monk who was unjustly accused of theft and expelled from his monastery, losing not only his religious vocation, but also the reputation built over decades of devoted service. For years, he lived as a beggar in the mountains, facing hunger, cold, and solitude, but maintaining his spiritual practice with even greater intensity. When the truth finally came to light, and he was invited to return with honors, he gently refused, saying, "That injustice was the greatest gift I received, for it forced me to find God outside the temple walls and discover that He dwelt in my own heart all along." The verification practice is revealing. Mentally revisit the most painful episodes of your journey and observe whether there is still latent resentment, or if, on the contrary, you can sincerely perceive how each experience contributed to shaping the wise and compassionate person you have become. If the second option predominates, your soul has already transmuted a great part of its karmic debts into spiritual treasure. The fourth sign of karmic liberation manifests through the gradual but definitive disappearance of chronic anxiety about the future. Not the healthy concern that motivates responsible planning, but that diffuse existential terror that keeps so many souls prisoners of catastrophic scenarios that never materialize, spending precious energy in imaginary battles against non-existent enemies while real life flows alongside, offering opportunities for growth and joy that go unnoticed by the mind obsessed with future phantoms. When your karmic debts are being paid off, a fundamental trust in the universe's benevolence establishes itself in the deepest layers of consciousness, not as forced mental belief, but as visceral knowledge that you are constantly being cared for by an infinite intelligence that orchestrates every detail of existence to favor your spiritual evolution. Even in moments of external uncertainty, a subterranean peace sustains your being, whispering eternal truths that the noisy mind cannot muffle. The great master Ramana Maharshi illustrated this trust with the parable of the bird that builds its nest in a tree branch. The bird does not constantly verify whether the branch will break, does not lose nights of sleep imagining future storms, does not accumulate extra twigs from fear of scarcity. It simply builds its nest with the natural confidence that the tree will sustain it, and this confidence allows it to dedicate all its energy to what truly matters, building the perfect home for its offspring. Thus is the liberated soul. It trusts in the tree of divine providence. To recognize this sign in your own experience, observe whether you still lose precious hours of the present worrying about hypothetical future situations, or if you naturally develop a capacity to do what is within your reach in the present moment, and then deliver the result to the cosmos's care with genuine serenity. If the second attitude predominates, you are walking in the footsteps of realized beings. The fifth sign of karmic payment reveals itself through the spontaneous flowering of a quality of love that does not depend on reciprocity, approval, or even gratitude. A love that simply is like the sun that shines equally upon the just and unjust, like the rain that falls both on well-tended gardens and abandoned lots, like the wind that carries its freshness both to palaces and humble cabins. This love is not emotional conquest, personality development, but revelation of the soul's essential nature when it finally liberates itself from the chains of the wounded ego. When karma is paid, you discover that you can love even those who caused great sufferings in your life, not because you approved their actions or because you forgot the pain, but because you can see beyond superficial behavior and recognize the divine that inhabits hardened by ignorance. And this love is not sentimental weakness, but supreme spiritual strength that dissolves emotional poisons before they contaminate your own soul. Saint Teresa of Avila narrated how, in her final years of life, she felt genuine love even for the inquisitors who persecuted Christian mystics, understanding that they acted from fear and ignorance, not from intrinsic malice. "When I see a cruel man," she said, "I see a wounded child who never learned to love correctly, and my heart fills with compassion, not judgment." True love is not the privilege of saints. It is the natural right of every soul, that remembers its divine origin. The practical verification of this sign can be surprising. Mentally list people who caused significant wounds in your life and honestly observe whether there are still vestiges of anger, resentment, or desire for revenge, or if, on the contrary, you can genuinely wish peace and happiness for them, recognizing that your own well-being is completely independent of what happens to them. If the second attitude predominates, your soul has already transcended important layers of karmic debt. The sixth sign manifests as spontaneous liberation from the compulsion to accumulate, possess, and control material objects, not the forced poverty of one who rejects the world from bitterness or fear, but the serene detachment of one who understands that true wealth resides in the quality of consciousness, not in the quantity of possessions one can gather around oneself like illusory walls against existential uncertainty. When your karmic debts are paid off, you use what you have without being used by it. Appreciate the beauty of things without being enslaved by them. This detachment does not mean indifference or negligence toward material responsibilities, but a mature relationship where you appropriately care for your goods without them dominating your thoughts, defining your identity, or determining your value as a human being. It is like the difference between owning a house or being possessed by it. In the first case, you inhabit the space with gratitude and care. In the second, the space inhabits you through constant worries, envious comparisons, and obsessive fears of loss. Zen tradition preserves the story of Master Ikkyu, who possessed only 3 objects: a bowl for food, a staff for walking, and a cloak for protection from weather. When thieves invaded his simple cabin and discovered there was nothing to steal, he offered them tea and said, smiling, "I regret that you have come from so far to discover what I already knew. True wealth cannot be stolen because it is nowhere and everywhere at the same time." The thieves left transformed by the experience, some becoming disciples. To evaluate this sign in your own life, observe whether you still feel significant anxiety related to money, possessions, or material status, or if you have developed a balanced relationship where you appreciate what you have without obsession. Naturally share with those in need, and trust that your genuine needs will always be supplied. If the second attitude predominates, you are treading on sacred ground of karmic liberation. The seventh and supreme sign that you have paid all karmic debts manifests as spontaneous awakening of sacred perception that recognizes the divine presence woven through every detail of existence, not as philosophical concept or religious belief, but as direct and constant experience where the sacred and the everyday reveal themselves as aspects of a single, indivisible reality. When this sign awakens, you do not need to go to temples to find God. He comes to meet you in the morning song of birds, in the innocent smile of a child, in the profound silence of the starry night. This perception transforms each moment into living sacrament, each action into sacred offering, each breath into silent prayer that connects your individual being with universal cosmic consciousness. It is not exotic mysticism or experience reserved for rare saints, but natural return to the soul's original state when it finally liberates itself from the layers of conditioning that obscured its innate spiritual vision. Paramahansa Yogananda described this state as everyday samadhi, where the boundary between formal meditation and common life disappears completely. When you wash dishes, he told his disciples, you may be in deeper communion with God than many who sit in rigid postures pretending to meditate. What matters is not the body's position, but consciousness's position. A housewife who cooks with love is practicing perfect Kriya Yoga, for she is offering each movement as worship to the divine dwelling in her family. The verification of this supreme sign is intimate and unmistakable. Observe whether you still need special circumstances to feel spiritual connection, or if sacred presence has become constant companionship that accompanies you in the most mundane moments of daily routine. If your ordinary consciousness is already permeated with spontaneous reverence for life, you have reached the peak of human realization and your soul walks free like a bird that never knew a cage. As these revelations echo in your consciousness, know that the simple fact of recognizing these signs already demonstrates that your soul walks the luminous paths of liberation, not as a distant goal reserved for exceptional beings, but as the natural destiny of every consciousness that sincerely dedicates itself to spiritual awakening through conscious human experience. Each sign recognized in your own life is confirmation that the inner work you perform is producing eternal fruits, that lessons embraced with courage are dissolving ancestral debts and opening new territories of inner freedom. The soul that pays all debts of the past flies like a free bird in the skies of eternity, not because it escaped earthly responsibilities, but because it transformed them into opportunities of loving service to the divine plan that manifests through each life, each relationship, each challenge apparently casual that reveals itself as sacred school disguised as common experience. May these signs become guiding beacons on your journey, always reminding you that spiritual freedom is not the privilege of a chosen few, but divine inheritance awaiting to be claimed by every soul courageous enough to completely embrace its own transformation. If these signs have awakened deep recognition in your soul, if you have identified in your own journey evidence that ancestral karma is being transmuted into light through your conscious dedication to spiritual growth, then the time has come to amplify this light by sharing these revelations with other pilgrims who also seek signs of progress in their own paths of liberation. Leave your like on this video as energetic declaration that you honor the sacred process of karmic payment and desire that others find these same keys of spiritual self-evaluation, and subscribe to this channel to continue receiving teachings that illuminate the deepest mysteries of the soul's journey through human experience. Share this knowledge with those people you perceive ready for this understanding, perhaps someone who has questioned whether their suffering has purpose, perhaps a friend who seeks signs of spiritual progress, perhaps someone the universe will place in your path through the mysterious algorithm of divine synchronicity that connects kindred souls at perfect moments. And leave in the comments which of these signs most resonates with your current experience. For when we honestly share our growth journeys, we create collective energetic field that facilitates awakening for all beings still struggling in the chains of unconsciousness. May the infinite spirit that resides in you as you manifest through every gesture of liberation, may your soul continue flying toward complete union with the source of all love, and may you always be a blessed channel of hope for all those who still seek signs that spiritual freedom is possible and within reach of every sincere heart.